How's it going, everybody? Before you space out straight from the get-go because it's going to be a lot of numbers, hold on just a second. I will try my best to explain how these numbers are applicable to your actual gameplay. We have a few things to go over. I've done a similar feat video a few weeks ago where I explained the differences of identical feats on different characters. Some numbers were completely off, while others were consistent. I mentioned it back then that I left out in-log throwables as it's another big batch of feats and it would have made that video way longer. So what we're going to take a closer look at today are throwables like fire flask, bombs, etc. when they're used in lock. The deploy time, the overall duration, the recovery, which pretty much is the duration as you're vulnerable throughout the whole animation, and then the time it takes these feats to detonate, meaning how long do you have to escape the red circle that just appeared underneath your feet. But to give you actual information about all this, we first do need to look at the numbers. It's not half as bad as you might imagine. Let's start with the tier 4s. Guess we should do the old three first. Catapult, Arrow Storm and Fire Flask. There's no denying that two of these barely see any use anymore, and then we have Fire Flask, probably the overall best AoE damage feat, mostly because of its versatility. It has damage, area denial, good minion clear, and won't kill your own minions. And to my surprise, when checking the numbers of Arrow Storm and Catapult, they were all consistent. We're looking at 600 milliseconds of deploy time and 1000 milliseconds of recovery, which gives us a total time of 1600 milliseconds until you're able to defend yourself again. And then we have Fire Flask. Yeah, nothing's consistent here. At best we have time spans, I guess. Numbers are on screen. The biggest outlier by far is Warlord, fast deploy time and a short recovery give him a total animation time of 900 milliseconds. Bulk ties with him in total time, but she has a longer deploy time but less recovery. I don't need to read them all out loud. I can understand that different character models will have varying lengths of animation to simply make them look better, but even recovery values are completely off and overall duration is also not consistent. Compare this to Arrow Storm. Shinobi has a completely unique animation, same as Aramusha, but still stays consistent overall. Vikings don't like rules, I guess. So now how long do we have to get away from any of these? As usual, the answer isn't so easy. Well, it is for Catapult, you have the audio cue and then you have 2 full seconds to get away. We all know that feat's pretty easy to escape now. For both Fire Flask and Arrow Storm, we're looking at 1100 milliseconds. Once the flask hits the ground, you see a little flash, well, if you pay attention to it, and that's when the timer starts. For Arrow Storm, it's a little more complicated. Each row takes 1100 ms to come down, but obviously if you didn't get hit by the first volley, then you have ample time to get away. Moving on to the other tier 4s. Ignis Imber from Lawbringer is equivalent to Warlord's Fire Flask, overall duration of 900. The deploy time can be argued as I used feats going on cooldown as a measurement, but as it's a multi-use feat, it's displayed a little different. The feat going on cooldown was always the exact moment when the projectile appeared in-game, so when using that moment, we're looking at a deploy time of 500 ms. Overall, pretty good numbers for this feat. Explosion time is longer than Fire Flask though. We're looking at 1600 ms, which should make it much easier to escape, as it also has a much smaller radius. Spear Storm is pretty much death from above what Catapult wants to be. We do have a slight difference between offensive stance and defensive stance. It deploys slightly faster than offensive stance, but the overall recovery is longer than, for whatever reason. The time for the spears to come down is 400 ms, so if you strictly react to the red circle, you'll most likely get hit. The audio cue is what you need to pay attention to, but that won't tell you where exactly it's placed, so yeah, it's a good feat. Janu's Orbital Strike isn't looking too good either, small radius and an overall time of 1200 ms. Deploy time and the recovery seem a little off, but that's just probably a one frame recording error. The time from bright flash to actual damage is 1200 ms. The feat gets dodged quite often as it's, let's just call it, a very flamboyant stance and animation. Also, the circle isn't that big, a normal dodge usually is enough to get away. Then we have the bombs. Pugno Mortis is actually quite consistent, 700 ms of deploy time and then 200 ms of recovery for overall 900 ms animation. Except for Conqueror, that man gets another 800 ms of recovery on top of the deployment time, so he is stuck for 1500 ms. Conk already has no tier 3 or tier 4 feat worth picking. Good thing is Pugno is also the worst of all the knights. Fiat Lux, on the other hand, has a few anomalies. It is the quickest of the bombs, coming in at 800 ms for most knights, except for Lawbringer with 700 ms. Deployment time and recovery vary for each character. I don't know who remembers, but Fiat used to do 25 damage, stun, put you out of stamina, and, which might have been forgotten already, disabled your ability to dodge. Fiat wasn't only used to clear minions, but also to confirm more bombs. Nowadays, it's a pretty useless feat, but strictly looking at the numbers, they are looking pretty good. That leaves us with two more. Jilin Ruse, Jeonhu's tier 2 throwable trap. Because it functions like a trap, it has some special properties that need explaining. First of all, the deploy time. Like I mentioned earlier, the time the projectile physically manifests in the game and the feat going on cooldown usually are exact same timing. But Jilin Ruse already goes on cooldown 33 ms into the animation and the projectile is flying at around 500 ms into the animation. Then another 500 ms of recovery for a total duration of 1 second. The explosion is also a little special as the explosion itself doesn't do damage, but the fire left behind will. Explosion happens at 933 ms when thrown at a locked on target, and then another 167 ms until the damage occurs. And the last one is Arrow Strike, Nobushi's tier 2 feat, which is, quite frankly, even garbage from a numbers perspective. Deployment time of 600, just like Arrow Storm, but we're then looking at 1300 ms of additional recovery, where she just stands there and probably prays that her opponent is blind and deaf. But yeah, that's it for now. A shout out to Rawit for sitting through the recording process with me. Certainly an experience. I will put all necessary links in the video description, the info hub which will include the spreadsheet and also the video about the previously tested feats. Ubisoft also mentioned upcoming feat changes, so who knows for how long this will be accurate, but for now, you should know which feats you can punish and how fast you need to react to avoid some damage. Let me know if there are any more questions. Until then, thanks for watching. Latest everybody.
Oh, I was already coming in from the other way. Can I, hello, guard break, please? Please, please, like, anything? Anywhere? No? That's fine. Okay.
I thought he did.
My guard break just doesn't work.
I guess I'm dead now. No, perfect, thank you.
Is he flashing?
Still have my tier 4.
Oh my god, the new ship fucking saved him.
Caltrops.
She'll die in her own caltrops. Dumb bitch.
Apparently not. Okay.
No! Ah! I didn't see. Oh, my bad.
Get out of here, bitch.
I have funny flask.
Be gone, thought.
I got glitched. My bad.
Yeah.
Hold on,
I
fellas.
tried to.
I mean, they're gonna time us out anyways. No, it doesn't. Shouldn't matter. Mid.
Well,
You
yeah.
can play mid if you,
It's okay.
Yeah, maybe you can break them. Yeah, sure.
if we just hold here once we break them, then
It's another
timer
timer,
resets.
Oh, click, bitch.
There we go.
Fuck out of here.
This is
Oh my god, you absolute fucking
You tried
imbecile.
to give out that lug and leave. Degenerate.
Dude, he fucking didn't make it to the bridge. Like, oh my god, that was so
You
funny.
report that for griefing?
I don't know, like, no. Jesus.
I deserve more XP for that.